Shalom, first and foremost, like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'Hashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem, Rakakadash, double honors, the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, who are teaching this truth in sincerity, the only ones teaching this truth. And a shout out to Yakims out there in four corners of the earth proclaiming this truth. Brakah the Yahweh, Brakah the Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem, Rakakadash, Brakah Tum. So, another year, 2026, the year of apostasy and of sellouts. And I can't think of any more apostasy than, of course, the notion that Babylon the Great is the Vatican, right? That was one of the first things I was challenged with when I first came into this truth, right? It's like, and that the Vatican's not Babylon the Great. Well, of course not, I mean, who rules over the whole earth? Does the Vatican really? Well, what if somebody worships something like chickens? I don't see any organized denomination for worshiping chickens. What if you worship yourself? What if you become your own God like Esau has? Well, I don't see a denomination for that, where you're a self-governed God, right? So therefore, the false prophet, which is what the Vatican really is, or the Vatican City, which is just a city where the Vatican is, right? That only controls the false religious system, which is a whole other subject, but it has nothing to do with Babylon the Great. The hammer of the old earth is America. America is that bully. And like everything else, so, now you're starting to see these other nations rise up against the bully, especially after Venezuela being taken down. That it had nothing to do with narco-terrorists, but rather, because if it was about narco-terrorists, then why the fuck ain't Pfizer busted? Why ain't AstraZeneca busted? Why isn't Johnson & Johnson busted? You know why? Because they're being paid by these elites themselves. You see, the greatest drug traffickers of all is your pharmaceutical companies, because they're the ones that mandated, they had a mandate worldwide that everybody had to be vaccinated in order to enter certain cities. In order to be able to do anything, you had to show proof that you've been vaccinated, And a lot of people died after getting the shot. It's a fact, Hey, you can check that. You can fact check that. That a lot of people, even though it was very, 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 very rare, ended up getting the shot and ended up killing a bunch of people. But you had a lot of false prophets out there. You had a lot of apostates out there teaching that it was okay to get the shot. No problem. Oh, and don't forget this one. And that the Most High created the coronavirus to punish Esau, but Esau pulled a fast one and created the shot. You remember that? Yeah, I remember them teaching that. So, hey, like everything else, so, you can see that, a lot of things have happened since then, right? And it's not about drug trafficking, right? And the greatest sex traffickers of all, those that are still in power, right? So basically under a false arrest, under false pretenses, of course, they, went and destroyed Venezuela, took over Venezuela, took it as their own state. We said that he wanted to control it as a state. Now he's been able to install the puppet government. Now you have a new leader of Venezuela. Regime change, right? And like everything else, rumors of war that through these Mossad agents that are currently being arrested in Iran, that the Israeli state's looking to secretly take over Iran from there. That they're going to come in, with the U.S. support to take over Iran, that Iran is pretty much next, And I believe that they're going to try to do something because, of course, man, they, it's no holds barred. And then there's a 72-hour deadline. China, which is Moab, has also issued a 72-hour deadline to release Maduro. So like everything else, hey, tensions are higher than they ever been before. So what are you teaching in 2026? Are you teaching that God loves everybody and that even the Edomites can be saved? Are you an apostate? Are you a sellout? Are you teaching any different name than Yahweh Shai? Where are you at in 2026, right? And what house are you in? Are you in the house of mirth or are you in the house of mourning? Like everything else. So you should be very afraid because the Most High is making it well known that he's about to destroy this place. That these Edomites are about to destroy each other. That the whole world is about to go to war. It's been nothing but war. Since the very start of this year. It's been a rumor of war, when you had all the ships over there. But hey, he said it, Cuba's next, Colombia's next, Greenland, and of course Iran. You know, so hey, major wars brewing. Not to mention, you know, they've already bombed like 13 different countries last year. Somalia getting a bunch of bombs. Nigeria, you know, places you don't hear about. The U.S. bombed Iran last year. So like everything else, so things are brewing, man. Things are brewing, you know. So like everything else, so, you know, where are you at? Where's your spirit at, man? You know? You know, because these days are being shortened for the elect's sake, right? You know, we're sighing and crying for the abominations being committed, right? Most of all for Esau being in power. You know, the trees are suffering, the animals are suffering every day with this man in power, you know? So it's about time the Most High took him out. And like everything else, though, you know, the banner is being raised against Babylon as this goes into, right? A 72-hour deadline raised. Let's try to get this to play.
Beijing just drew a red line, and they're dead serious about enforcing it. I'm Ray McGovern, 27 years inside the CIA. I've watched superpowers dance around each other for decades, testing limits while avoiding direct confrontation. But what's happening with China's ultimatum over Venezuela represents something I've never seen before. A nuclear power openly challenging American military action with demands that could trigger World War III. This isn't diplomatic protest. This is the moment when regional crisis becomes global confrontation between superpowers with incompatible strategic objectives and nuclear arsenals pointed at each other. The power struggle starts now, and there's no going back. Let me explain how Venezuela became the flashpoint for the next world war. When Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi delivered Beijing's ultimatum demanding immediate release of President Maduro and withdrawal of American forces from Venezuelan territory, he wasn't engaging in routine diplomatic theater. His language was precise, his deadline was specific, and his threats were backed by military capabilities that could devastate American interests worldwide. The forced capture of a democratically elected leader represents an unacceptable violation of international law that China will not tolerate, Wang declared in an emergency press conference that bypassed normal diplomatic channels. American military forces must withdraw from Venezuelan territory within 72 hours or face consequences that extend far beyond the Western Hemisphere. During my intelligence career, I learned to distinguish between diplomatic posturing and genuine threats. Wang's ultimatum contains specific language that signals Chinese willingness to escalate beyond economic retaliation toward military confrontation if American forces remain in Venezuela.
So there you have it. Well, you know Trump is not planning on letting Venezuela go. We will control Venezuela, he said, right? And he still has ambitions for Greenland and for Cuba and for Mexico. He said Mexico better watch their ass too. Hey, man, yo, hey, we said it that, hey, this is the Nero, man. He's going to start World War III. Well, World War III was already here before. He's just escalated it, right? Yo, and then there's more, right? Slovakia. But, hey, you know, drums of war, man. Almost all the stations are covering it, right?
Venezuela first. Israel will be allowed to take Iran. We will come for Colombia and Cuba. Any other country who does not part ways for the United States of America will be in the crosshairs of the United States of America's Department of War. We see massive military movements building up across the United States and throughout Europe. NATO is being divided. Russia and China are playing their part, and it appears, at least from the administration, that this division will be driven into World War III. Let's go ahead and look at exactly what our politicians...
So, like everything else, so World War III, both little clips are talking about World War III, which was already here before, but now has just escalated because, well, we knew Trump was going to escalate everything, right? Because he'd been trying to overthrow Maduro for so long anyways, you know, and take Venezuela as his own. Because like everything else, so, you know, they did it before with Noriega, you know, but unlike with Noriega, you know, where the rest of the world didn't do anything, now they're ready to make a move. And so we're going to see a lot of retaliation moves. You know, we're going to see lots of places taking other places and claiming them as their own, because this is what the West has been doing for a long time. They did the same with Saddam Hussein. They did the same with Bashar al-Assad. They've done the same with Muammar Gaddafi. You know, well, now you're going to start seeing Russia take it, right? Now, a lot of people try to say, well, Russia took Crimea, you know, but did they take Kiev? Did they go in and arrest Vladimir Zelensky? Absolutely not. You see, but they could have, right? If it's for the same pretenses, because there's a war criminal right there. Vladimir Zelensky ain't even supposed to be in power anymore, you know, but has Russia gone to arrest him? No. So, and it's a false arrest, because Maduro had already pleaded not guilty to these alleged charges, right? And supposedly, you know, got to double check it, but supposedly they dropped the charges against him, because this really wasn't about, you know, narco-terrorism. This is about just taking Venezuela as their own. You know, we have the oil, and we're going to keep the oil. That's what he said to Bashar al-Assad in his first term. You know, that's really about controlling the oil. And then the secret plan to invade Iran and to change leadership there. Now, they already killed the president of Iran a couple of years ago, you know, the supposed helicopter crash. But they already killed their leader a long time ago, you know. And, you know, he assassinated General Soleimani, you know, in 2020. So they've been having plans for a long time to pretty much take out the Ayatollah, you know. So, you know, through these fake, you know, Mossad agents, you know, inside Iran, infiltrating that, Israeli state's planning to go in. In fact, Benjamin Netanyahu went in and told Russia, oh, we don't plan to attack Israeli state doesn't plan to attack Iran, which we know that anything that they say, they do the complete opposite, right? You know, that there was supposed to be a ceasefire plan in Gaza. Well, that ain't happening. Yeah, Trump's peace plan. Yeah, that ain't happening. You trust Trump? You see he's a man of peace? Or is he a man of war? Well, he calls it Department of War. Now you're seeing its full-fledged military effects, right? You know, that anybody that does not want to deal with the West, that kicks out any of their, you know, investors, if you want to call them that, you know, that pretty much, though, they're subjugated to be overthrown, you know, because like everything else, though, Hugo Chavez years ago did not want to deal anymore with these companies because they were being ripped off, you know, because that's what Babylon the Great does. They take all the goods and then they leave you with some, but they pretty much, though, they take everything and then they want more, you know. So Trump says, that's mine. That belongs to me. You know, that belongs to America. So like everything else, though, Venezuela is just another state of the U.S. The U.S. is going to run Venezuela, you know, but you still got this, got others. Even Vladimir Putin is demanding the release of Nicolas Maduro as well. So we're going to see a lot of things pop off this year, you know, and we're going to see many false prophets rise and deceive many, right? Because a lot of people were deceived into taking the shot, you know. Hey, that happened in 2020, which was a year of prophecy. You know, prophecy, which was a prelude to the MOTB. Now, the MOTB, you know, will come out via the new system that they're trying to bring in. You know, they already got rid of the penny last year, and a lot of places are saying that they have to round out to the nearest nickel. And even Wenco here in town just says that they prefer direct change, you know, that it has to be exact change. Or they may not even give you your fucking money back. You know, because, you know, they tried to use the coin shortages before. Now, Winco's always been shady like that, because they always said, oh, well, we can't because of coin shortage, so they wouldn't give you your change back. So if it was $17.92, you ate the 8 cents, you know, even though you might have paid them $18. Well, you know, there's a coin shortage. Yeah, they had to, if you handed them a $20 bill, they had to hand you 2 ones back, but they didn't have to give you change because there's a coin shortage. You see, they've always been scam artists like that, but now they're just saying the same thing with this. You know, using every opportunity, and you're going to find a lot of places doing that, you know, because, hey, you know, Edom, you know, Babylon is trying to fight for their dominance in the world because they don't have the dominance anymore. And yeah, it's a direct confrontation with China, with Moab, you know, because this Third World War, you know, is really about regime changes and about taking territories. Just like if you play the game of Risk, yeah, countries get taken all the time. So you see it's a game of Risk, and it's about to go nuclear. Now, before it goes nuclear, of course, they have to have a new world order. They have to have it all in place. And that infrastructure is already there, better known as AI. And like everything else, though, you know, if you find that these words are altered in any way possible or it doesn't make any sense, try to catch me on BitChute, Odysee, and Rumble, because YouTube is already changing the platforms, and they are now changing the videos. They're using artificial intelligence to change what's being said. You know, your videos are getting altered because a brother had already proved it by playing what was originally in Spanish, but yet it was translated to English, and instead of Shalom and Yahweh Shai was changed to Yahweh, you know, and the whole thing was translated in English, and that's not what the message was. So our messages are being scrambled because they're going to use it, you know, which is going to bring in a famine of the word, because even though we're going to be doing videos, our videos are going to be so altered that it looks like we're not even telling you the truth when we are telling the truth. See, they're going to use AI to scramble our messages. Hey, it's a year of apostasy and sellouts, right? So even we're going to look like, even though we may not have said that, but sure going to look like that. So you got to use discernment when you're watching videos from now on. Even other brothers that have YouTube channels, you know, that still have them, you know. I wasn't even on YouTube until just more recently because, you know, just saying that very little bit about you know what, about the juicy juice, would have gotten my video taken down, would have been under the community guidelines strike. But like everything else, so they seem to not really care about that now, because they have a newer weapon using AI to alter the message, alter what's being said. So, you know, we're going to see a lot more of that, you know, because again, this is the year of apostasy and sellouts, you know, and things are kicking off with a bang. You know, World War III has already been announced. It's been here for quite some time. Now you're starting to see the full scale of it, where, you know, countries are falling. But the U.S. is not even playing the heroic role anymore. You know, they can't go around saying that, oh, we did this to help out the Venezuela people. We care so much about the Venezuela people. You know, when they're deporting everyone who's not white, pretty much. You know, that's not an Edomite. They're deporting. They're getting rid of. You know, so it's really about Edomite supremacy, white supremacy, fascism, you know, socialism. And, you know, it doesn't make any sense that why Jake would even think that this man is their friend. You know, when the truth really comes out, that he looks at you as a bunch of lowlifes, a bunch of drug addicts, and the cause for everything, right? Jake gets the blame for everything, even though it's Edomites that go and fucking kill each other and do all this shit, they still want to blame Jake for it, right? The gang violence has got to be blamed on Jake, you know? And, you know, the drugs has got to be blamed on Jake. It's got to be blamed on the Mexicans. It's got to be blamed on the cartels, not the Edomites that went and brought it themselves, that invaded Afghanistan just to have control over the poppy fields that brought fentanyl over to this place to begin with. So who are the real fucking drug cartels? Who runs the cartels? The military, the U.S. military. A lot of the, you know, now retired military, they became drug cartel protectors, you know, because of course they offered a great peace, right? Because, hey, let's face it, when you serve this place, man, you ain't giving shit. Veterans benefits, all that, it ain't shit, man. It ain't enough to survive on. Nobody fucking wants to hire you anymore, you know? So you're done for. So what do a lot of them do? Well, a lot of them just fucking turn to wickedness, you know, which is, you know, being cartel runners, you know? That's why the cartels are strong. That's why you don't fuck with the cartels, right? They got Navy SEALs and shit, man. They fucking take your ass out. So, you know, it's hypocritical of them to say that they're fighting a war on drugs. But you see, he wants to emulate everything of Ronald Reagan. Did they not have a war on drugs? Did they not just overthrow a leader? You know, they overthrew Grenada. General Noriega was overthrown during the Reagan administration. You know, they just totally went in and took out Manuel Noriega to take control of that country, of Grenada, you know, and they did the same thing here. So, you know, we're talking about Trump's second term, aka Nero. And like everything else, though, you know, we're seeing, you know, the fall of Babylon, you know, as it really doesn't have its hegemony anymore, its hegemonic powers, you know. And Denmark is already saying that, look, you even think about touching Greenland, you could kiss NATO goodbye, because that will be a direct attack against NATO. Now, Trump has already had ambitions for breaking off NATO and breaking away from NATO anyways. But you see, that's prophecy in itself. That these shall hate the whore and burn her with fire. They shall drink the Babylonian juice, right? They shall eat with the whore, but then they shall burn her with fire. You know, and that's talking about NATO. They're talking about the EU, you know, that they're going to turn on Babylon. They're going to turn against America. Now, Ukraine, that's another subject as well, because, you know, they pretty much they wanted to keep Ukraine as a state there, but, you know, Ukraine was never going to become a NATO, but yet most of the NATO members wanted to, you know, back Zelensky, which Trump has not been backing Zelensky, but has rather been pulling out of that deal, you know, and so they're divided over that, you see. Like everything else, though, a kingdom that's divided will not be able to stand. So we're seeing the end of his kingdom. And we're seeing him come down having great wrath, knowing that they have but a short time. You know, they only got a certain amount of time to rule. And this Babylonian American empire has been around for 250 years. So that's a time that an empire ends. 2026, you know, could be that year that the American empire, the second leg of the beast, is totally taken out. And you see that, indeed, you know, NATO's breaking off. You know, that if he makes a move against Greenland, which he said he wanted Greenland, you know, he considers it his already, you know, because that's what he said, you know, it all belongs to him, you know. And he wants Afghanistan back as well, you know, so you just pay close attention there. Well, we're going to see probably another invasion of Afghanistan as well under false pretenses, just like the plans to go after Iran, you know. So we're seeing it. We're seeing it in our time. You know, this is being played out, you know. But, you know, with the alteration of our messages, you know, and them not being, you know, not being delivered, right? You know, the messages being scrambled and not being delivered, you know, brings in a famine of the word, right? You know, we're in a time of lamentation, a time of suffering. And, you know, we're all going through personal suffering. You already know about my case, you know. But every day is a bitter day, right? You know, like losing an only son, you know. In the case of, you know, what's just happening, I feel all that. You know, but we're in that time, though, that, you know, we are just looking to be delivered from this place, ultimately. Because there's no greater misery than living in fucking Babylon the Great. You know, watching this devil get away with everything. Amos chapter 8, verse 9, It shall come to pass in that day, saith the Most High Yahweh, that I will cause the sun to go down at noon, and I will darken the earth in the clear day. And will turn your feasts into mourning, and all your songs into lamentation. And I will bring sackcloth upon all loins, and baldness upon every hair, and will make it as the mourning of an only son, and thereof as a bitter day. You know, so, like losing your son. Behold, the days come, saith the Most High Yahweh, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor thirst of water, but of hearing the words of Yahweh, Yahweh Shai. You know, because they are, you know, they definitely have gotten rid of that name, Yahweh, Yahweh Shai, because they changed it to Yahweh, right? And it's not Shalom, it's Shalom. You know, that's what they've done. That's what they did to alter the other brother's video, man. You know, so, yeah, if you hadn't gotten that public service announcement, you know, it's out there. That, indeed, they are altering the messages. So, what house are you in? You know, are you in the house of mirth? Did you just celebrate that bullshit? You know, what's there to fucking celebrate, right? You know? No, man, you should be in the house of mourning. You should be sighing and crying for the abominations being committed. Because if you're comfortable with this place, well, the Most High is obviously not dealing with you. You should be in a time of lamentation. You're seeing all your brothers being rounded up, right? You know, you should want to repent and say, you know, that's if you haven't come to this truth yet or you're struggling with it. You should be like, Yahweh, save me. Yahweh, Yahweh Shai, save me. You know, save me from this. Save me from this devil. You know, and repenting and being sincere about it. And the Most High will hear from you. You know, that's all it takes. And then, you know, get familiar with this, you know, and find a camp nearby. I just happen to be the only one in Redding that is teaching this truth, you know, but there are camps nearby. There's one in Sacramento, and there's, you know, one in San Francisco, and, you know, going up north, I believe there's one in Washington, you know. I'm not sure if there's one in Portland, but I know there's one in Washington, you know. So we're around, you know, and just like everything else, though, keep repenting, you know, and while you still got time, because things are about to change. This place is about to go down, and it's not going to be long that they're going to get rid of the dollar. And the dollar is going to crash completely, and it's going to be a cashless society. And then they're going to implant everyone with the micro chip to track their every movement. You're going to be tracked and traced for everything. You're going to have digital IDs. You're going to have real ID in order to do anything anymore. And that real ID is not just any picture being taken. You know, that is a digital imprint. And you're going to have it. And eventually, it's going to be to the point that it's going to be in your hand or in your forehead. And Neuralink is definitely going to be out there too. You know, for those that are rich, they're thinking, oh, okay, well, now we can do all these things, right? You know, so a lot of people are going to get that. And there's going to be a lot of apostates out there. You know, sellouts are going to tell you that's okay because that's not the mark of the beast. You know, that the mark of the beast is something else. Well, you know, you'll just have to be decisive. So hopefully you heed this warning in time and repent while you still got time. For that, I want to say, Bracha the Yahweh, Bracha the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakadash, Wa Abab Babal. Bracha Thumb, Jehovah elect, Shalom.